Questions about class?
Yeah, I got one for you.
You always do, Todd.
I know. I don't know if you want to answer it or not, but I started looking at your bonus assignments. Surprising to you, probably. You're going to have us open the files within a function. And the problem I came across is I was using the try and accept.
Mm-hmm.
If a file does not get open, and if you try to close the file outside of the function, you get an error message.
Correct. If the file does not open and you close it outside, you will get an error.
What's the proper way to handle that?
There is, and you could do it through a try except, and I would have to look up the syntax, but there is a syntax where in an if statement you could check to see if the file is open. Check the file. There's a syntax to check the file handle, because I believe, and I'm trying to remember, I believe that if the file does not open properly, the file handle is a null that you return, a null value, but I'd have to look that up, and so you could check to see if the file had opened properly. Quite frankly, if that's the only thing you're having an issue with, don't worry about it.
Well, yeah. The way I'm understanding on the accept part, you have those conditions for those certain type of errors, like OS errors and values. So if you just put accept there, it will catch any errors that will happen.
That should, yeah. So if in a try you did the file close and did an accept, it should handle, if you do an accept without a type, it should handle any kind of error.
Okay, that's what I came up with. Yeah. So I just want to make sure
that would work. Mm-hmm.
Oh, he said questions about Python.
Well, that was about Python.
I know, that was a joke.
Yeah, well, it's also a big snake. It's also a big snake.
Can of worms? Open up a can of worms?
Yeah. I know I've got a student that has snakes. I don't know if if they've got a Python or not. I had a friend that had a Python. I think anybody who's got snakes for pets are crazy. Am I talking to about any of you guys now? Guess not. Okay.
I agree with you 100% because snakes are just weird and nasty.
Yeah. Okay.
Chickens and ducks.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I submit the labs with the text files, do you want me to resubmit the text file or just the
okay.
The program?
You do not have to submit the text files because I've got those.
Okay.
And in the one that you have to create, well, I'm going to run the program with my own data and create it. So you do not need to include the text files.
Okay.
So, quick question. In Lab 29, when I talked to you on Monday, I tried putting the 0 in the double quotes, and it still wouldn't let me exit using 0.
Okay, have you got that up to show? Can you show, let me unshare my screen if you can share that, and I can maybe tell you what was going on.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
Line 22. Right?
Well, your while loop, you're still looking for X to be a number. So both in your while loop and your if, it should be, you should define X. Well, actually up the top, defining X is okay where you've got, but you need to put the 0 in quotes, both in your while and in your if. And also in your if.
I believe he's using the wrong comment for 23. You're not breaking out of the loop with continue.
Well, continue will move him up to the top, and then it will test the condition. So it doesn't matter if the condition now will be false, and it will exit out. So either way will work in that case. And now it is actually.
It didn't print what I was looking for.
Well, you don't. You're not wanting to print X. You're wanting to print the list, are you not? Because X is just that last value that you entered from the keyboard.
Okay. So
Okay, now if you're using the F string syntax, you don't need the dot format because you've told it the variable there. Don't worry about spelling of these.
Now, so
okay.
yesterday I finally Googled why you're always talking about cheese and
Yeah.
cheese shops.
Yeah.
And watched the skit and finally figured that out.
Yeah.
So I was like, what is his deal with cheese?
Have you Googled the Monty Python spam yet?
No, I haven't seen the spam. I've seen the Holy Grail now, and I've seen the one about the cheese shop, but no.
The spam one was also part. The TV series they had was their TV series. They had all those short skits, and the spam skit is one of the short skits in it. So you might want to do the Monty Python spam and see that. I have been told by some students that I should always, just like their TV series always started, and now for something completely different, that I should start all my classes that way.
That's funny.
Okay. Other questions?
Oh, thank you, by the way.
Yeah, data types are important. Data types are important. Also, printing the correct variables or keeping those straight. I keep myself on production programs I do. In my comments, I always have a data dictionary, or if it's just say a loop counter or something, I'll put a comment at the loop as to what every variable does. That way, having those comments, I hopefully can keep myself from getting confused as to what variable is what. And in large programs, you might have hundreds or more variables. And so if you don't name them something that makes sense, as well as having some sort of dictionary document that tells you what they are, you can get into real trouble.
Robert, on that lab too, you're going to have to add another for loop as well.
All right, thank you. So one other quick question on Lab 28 with the tables. Was trying to get it to format properly to get everything to line up real good, but I was having trouble doing so.
Okay. I tell you what, why don't you share, if you've got that, share, and we'll just use you as our guinea pig today.
Okay, wait one while I get that pulled up.
Okay.
Yeah, I've battled with the formatting on that too. It seemed like you had to either align the right side of all the numbers or the left side, but where the numbers weren't all the same length, it would change, you know.
Numbers should always be right aligned.
Okay.
Yeah. And okay. All right. Too bad there's not an option for me taking control of your screen. Oh, yeah, there is. Let me take control of your screen. I'm going to request it, and you probably will have to approve it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So what you should do, what I would do in this one is even the radius down here, you've got it. I would do, the radius is probably, get in the quote, the radius is probably 1 decimal place. So I would make it say 4.1, and then it's a float. That says 4 characters wide, which should be wide enough for all the radius, and all 1 decimal place. What that will do is down, once it got above 10, and it shifted everything over 1 here, that will stop that. Then the others, I would again, whatever the spacing I want. So if I give it, you're using 25, so I'll say 25 dot, let me say 2 decimal places, and it's a float. It automatically right aligns. That greater than's fine in those, but you don't have to have it. And if I do 30 dot, again, 2 decimal places, and float, when I run it now, everything should be 2 decimal places, and it will line everything up. Now, your headings, that 25 and the 25 is probably a little big. Let me make it 15, which may be a little small.
Okay, the reason for the big headings was to try to get it to line up over those huger numbers.
Yeah. Well, see, once you add, see, the 15 says 15 spaces. The 2F, or the F says float, but the 2 says 2 decimal places.
Okay.
So once you say,
decimal.
You're saying now the area is going to take up 15 spaces. So the area is going to take up 15 spaces, and it's going to have 2 decimal places in it. The circumference is sticking, is way out here. So if I make it 20, it's going to now take 20 spaces, still right aligned because it's a number by default, 20 spaces. But again, the .2 says display it. It doesn't round it. It says display it with 2 decimal places.
Okay.
Question about the formatting on that.
Okay.
Let's say the circumference column, for instance.
Yeah.
You got it set to 20. Okay. Is that counting, or is that spacing off the area column, or is that going completely off the left margin?
No, if from the end of the area column.
Okay. And is it spacing backwards with the numbers? Like, is it going from right to left instead of left to right?
Okay. So the area column ends after the 4 here on the first line. Okay.
Okay.
The 20 spaces is what I've got highlighted now.
Okay. That's what I meant. So you're actually spacing to the left of it.
Yeah.
Of the number.
Yeah. You're spacing starting at the last space. Actually, one more because you got a space between the quotes, which is okay. But with the spacing, even if I didn't put spacing here, that would work. Now, what I would have done probably in the headings is the radius one's probably okay. Then for the area, I would probably use maybe 15 might be too many, but let's try the 15. And instead of putting all the spacing that way, come over here. Now I need to change that to say 20. And again, the greater than right aligns it. Now when I run it, I'm controlling the spacing with the number, not spacing over. And so it's easier to change, say, 20 to 25 or whatever.
That looks a whole lot neater than what I turned in. And and looking back on that assignment and what I originally did, I can understand the comments that you left of would you like a table turned in like this?
Yeah.
And I can see where it was very confusing and all jumbled.
Mm-hmm. And you weren't the only one. Most people did it in a table format, but there were several that did it the way you did it. Okay, other questions?
All right. You want me to go ahead and stop presenting?
Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing yours.
Okay. Thank you, by the way.
All right, no problem. We're getting a little more interactive. Those of you that were in the very first Zoom session, I don't think, other than one person, anybody said a word. And this is getting more the way it really works for these sessions. Okay, other questions? Okay. Object-oriented programming is something that we started seeing in the early 80s. Probably the first true object-oriented program was, our programming language was Smalltalk. And it may have actually came out in the late 70s. I can't remember. C++ probably popularized it. The C language was not object-oriented. When Bjorn Strongborg, or however he pronounces it, created C++, he originally called it C with objects. And most programming languages since have been, quote, object-oriented. Now, Bjorn has two statements about programming. One deals with the C++ exclusively. Well, I guess not, but especially. And Python does not have what's called pointers, which is great. Most or a lot of languages, C++, C, Java, they all have something called pointers. And Bjorn actually says that almost everybody uses pointers incorrectly. And I would agree with that. Hold on a second. I need to. Okay, Kayla, I think he is trying to get in, if you're communicating with him right now, I think he's trying to get in with a private password for a private session, not for this class. So if you could let him know that he needs to use the meeting ID and password for this class, and you might want to send that to him.
I have multiple.
Okay. Yeah. Because we've had a couple of private sessions.
I had one more formatting question I thought of before you launch into this. The different types of formatting, like the F string versus the dot format, is there any reason to use one or the other? If you understand what I'm saying, like
between the F string and the dot format, no. one is just as good. There are a couple of things you can kind of do with dot format that people have done. The F string started in Python 3.6. Now, what you don't want to use is the old Python 2 style formatting. And the Python 2 style formatting is very similar to the C language formatting, where you use like %s, %fs, and things for your format. And that is still there because of old purposes, but it is highly recommended that you never use those. But if you feel more comfortable with dot format than F string, feel free to use the dot format. I have kind of moved to just using F string because, to me, the one advantage is by putting the variable names inside the curly brackets along with the formatting, getting the order. One of the problems I would have is getting my order incorrect in my dot format function. And if I got that, then the printing was the wrong order and all. And this way, by using the variable names inside the curly brackets as well, I didn't run into that issue. The other thing that you can do with a dot format is you can actually give it a default value in case that item was not passed. And that would be, to me, the one thing that that could be.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd say that's mainly what I wanted to know is
Yeah.
if there was any certain reason why you were using one in some places and the other one in other places.
Yeah. The only thing I can think of advantage is really in the dot format. You can give a default value, and you might be actually able to do it in an F string inside the curly brackets there, but I have never seen anybody do it. And I've never, quite frankly, I've never looked it up. So maybe that'll be something I'll look up after class and see if you can actually do that. That way, if the variable's not been initialized, then you wouldn't get an error. Okay. All right. As I was saying, classes were something that, I think I was saying, Bjorn said using pointers, most people use it wrong. And I agree with him. Part of the reason I agree with him is one of the reasons so many programs have buffer overflows is the use of pointers. And that's well beyond anything we could discuss here anyway. He also says that a lot of people use classes incorrectly. And that I am not, what I've read, I'm not 100% clear on what he means by using classes incorrectly. But I'm not going to argue with him. He created the language. He knows more about object-oriented programming than I'll ever want to know, much less use. So, but the idea of object-oriented programming in standard programming, which is what we've been doing, the data is separate from the functions or separate from the calculations. There's no intermingling of it. Yes, you may have a calculation in one line and then do something, and it's using the data. But what classes or object-oriented programming, the idea is that what you do is you group together your data and whatever functions or processes, whatever code that can manipulate that data, whether it be creating the data, changing the data, anything like that becomes part of the class. And you can't do anything with the data that's not defined as part of the class. Now, what that means is that you can protect to some degree the data. You can restrict what can be done with the data, how it can be manipulated, but also you make it modular. If I create a class and I get all of my methods, all of those manipulations correct, it becomes very easy to then take that class and include it in another program. You can also take a class and do what they call extend the class, where you have a base of certain things, and then for a particular type with subtype within that class, extend it and add additional things. An example there is you would have, say, a vehicle, and that vehicle has some basics, but then you create a truck where a truck has all the properties of a vehicle plus the things that are particular to a truck. Then you create a motorcycle that has all the properties of a vehicle, but then the things specific to a motorcycle. And you can extend those classes that way. Again, being able to reuse those classes, once you've got a class correct, then reusing it in other programs, you know that all of the calculations, all the methods, all of the things that you can do with that data works the same and is correct. So it's not reinventing the wheel. And a lot of the idea came, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is a beginning programming class, so everything we have done is reinvent the wheel. So what I've done here, because of the amount of typing and all, I've gone ahead and created a class called dog. And the way you create it is you say, instead of define, which you would do for a function, you do say class. Notice it is on the same level as my main. You will see some people will define the classes inside of main. This is bad in a number of reasons. One is nesting a class inside of a function is not considered good. But the other is that reduces the portability of it. If it's inside of main and I'll see the class and then part of code and class and code all intermingled that are code that's not part of the class. By keeping it totally separate, it makes it easy. I could just copy all this and paste it into a new program. The other thing I can do is if I know I'm going to use this class over and over again, I can save just the class in a document and then include it using an include statement, include it so that class comes into another program. And that's actually how you would typically do it. You take your classes, put them in their own file, and do an import to bring that class into every program that's going to share the same class. Doing that too, as soon as I change that class, it changes it for every program using it. So that's a good thing.
So is the classes here similar to the class in HTML?
Not really. There's a slight similarity, but not really. The HTML classes are much less programmatic. HTML classes are really a way of grouping things more than this. Typically in HTML, I guess I'm saying no mainly because in HTML there's really no programming or very little programming as such.
Okay, I was just trying to understand in my head.
Yeah, it is a way of, it's okay. It is a way of grouping things though. So you define your class. Now, variables that are part of the class typically are defined next. So I know that I'm going to have a D name and a D bark. Notice when I define my class, I put the D in dog capital. It is recommended that classes be defined using that Pascal case that we talked about near the end of, or in the first week or two of the semester, the Pascal or cap words, it's sometimes called, where variables, if you've got two words, variables, it's recommended it is the first word underscore the second word. With classes, they want you to use or recommend to use that Pascal case or cap words, it's also called. If you don't, will it be wrong? No. But when you use that naming method, it's very easy for somebody reading that program to know, okay, that is a class, not a variable. That's a class, not a variable. So in it,
are you saying to push, like if it was two different words, push them together and just capitalize the first letter of each?
So instead of dog, if it was dog cat, the capital D, capital C with nothing in between.
Got you.
Again, there's nothing, as long as it's a valid name, variable name, there's nothing that's going to be considered wrong in it. But again, you go back 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, and you look at this code, and if you followed those conventions, you immediately know what these are used for. So I've created a D name and a D bark for dog name and dog bark. I was lazy on typing. And I gave them an initial value, Fido and Loud. So whenever I create an instance of this class, it's going to default to Fido and Loud for the name and the bark. Any variables, you can have lists, dictionaries, any variables that you need to be part of the class can be defined. Now, here's a difference between Python.
Finally, I'm in.
Okay. Here's a difference between Python classes and C and Java and many other language classes.
I'm in.
Those languages have the concept of private and public items. Python has chosen not to do that. Essentially, every variable and function inside of it is considered a public variable. Public being meaning it can actually be manipulated outside of the class. It doesn't have to be manipulated within the class definition. I have mixed views on that. I like it in that it simplifies the class definition somewhat. The negative of it is anyone using that class can manipulate that data without using the methods or functions that we create. So we define the class similar to the way we would define a function, and then any variables that are part of that class that are public variables, we'll say. Then you have, and this is the only time you really should nest a function definition inside of something. Some people have been nesting their function definition, so they were nested inside of main. They were indented and defined. Python allows that, but that is not considered good programming. And I have seen some tutorials and things that they actually do it in those, and that's not considered good programming in general, and also in Python. But the one place you put functions inside of another structure is in your class definitions, because we're defining a dog, and then all of the functions that are defined that are indented inside that class definition become functions or methods that are associated with the class. So I've created a couple of them. I've said, okay, I've got a function called update_name, and it's going to receive, when it's called, it's going to receive a name. And then I'm going to change the name of the dog there. And here I've got dog.name, the name of the class, dot the variable. That way, if I actually had a variable just name, and I could have used name and bark here and just name and bark without the D's. And if I said name, dog.name equals name, it would be able to distinguish between the two, tell that they were different. I use the D name just to separate them, so they're easier. We can tell they're different things. So in this update name, all I'm doing is updating or changing the name of the dog. I've done also an update bark, where I'm going to call that method at some point to change the kind of bark the dog has. And then I've created a print dog function or method that's going to print their current values. So I've created 3 functions that are part of the class. These are methods that are to be used in the class. And if I had other things, and a lot of times there would be calculations. Maybe I create a method called circle, and in that circle I have a class called circle. In that circle I have a function or a method that if I pass it the radius of the circle, it figures the circumference. Maybe I have a method that figures the surface area. Things like that, where I can incorporate those inside of my class. Now, again, they would probably be more complex than just one calculation, because each of these methods can be as complex as needed.
At least for, like, if you had to do a common calculation all the time for the company you work for with their data, you would set it up in a class, and then as you need to do that group of addition, multiplication, whatever, you turn on the class and it runs the data through your, is that what we're doing?
That is one thing you would do. If depending on it, you could just create a function, and you can actually create a library of functions, save that library of functions as a separate file, and then you can import those just like we would import math, time, all those others. You can import your own. Whether I would do it as a class or a function would really depend on what it was that calculation was. So
are these like little miniature programs you're making to put into your bigger program to save the typing, basically?
You can think of it that way, yes. It also is, one of it is that very thing would work. The other is, what you're doing is you are limiting the user as to what he can do with that data. Because if the user can only use that data using the functions inside the class, those methods inside the class, you're limiting what the user can do, but you're also insulating the user from the actual structure of the data. So the data and these methods or these functions work as a single thing. Okay. It does take it takes a while for a person to wrap their heads around classes, and once you do, you see hopefully where they're appropriate, but also where they're not appropriate. Give you another example here. We just got dog being Fido and loud, but we could have hair, color, we could have a lot of other things, and maybe all those variables match an SQL database. So we use the methods in the class to access that SQL database and possibly use it for updating the database as well. So if I need to make changes or update the database, then I use the I tie that class to the database, and by tying it there, again, how many of you in database have ever messed up a query? You know, all of us. What if you have messed up, instead of a query, what if you messed up an update? What if you messed up a delete? Those things. And so you could, in the class, if this Python program was interacting with the database, you could in the class program assurances, all your error handling, making sure the data is valid. So data validation in there using the class. Make sure that name doesn't have, say, quotes and commas in it. That could be used as a SQL injection. All of those things could be as a class that is used in your Python program to tie into and make sure that any changes to the database meet those validity checks. Okay? Does that kind of answer it?
That makes sense. Kind of like damage control.
Oh, yes.
They could
one of the things,
actually mess with one little section versus wiping out your whole database.
right. And those of you that are programming majors in the fall, when you get into your server-side programming class and you'll be using PHP. One of the things that once you start interacting with the database, especially writing to it, that I'm sure John will stress, I know Dave did, and I always did when I would do PHP, is validate your data before you send your query to the database. So the person fills out a form in an HTML form and you submit it to say update the database, your PHP program should validate the data, make sure it's the correct format and all that other. I always used an example where you submitted HTML code that instead of updating the data, before we got to updating the database, where you submitted HTML code that would then display an image or something that was stored. Again, validating that data, make sure that what's written to it is valid, and that's what one of the things you definitely would do with classes. Now we're only going to look at classes today and Monday, because Monday's going to be the last, not the last Zoom session, but Tuesday and Wednesday Zoom next week. I'm just going to do question and answer stuff. So we're just introducing you to classes. We're not going to do any assignments on it.
Understood. Oh, understood.
Yeah. So as part of the class,
have we entered the bonus phase now of the lectures? Like, is this kind of stuff we need to know, but not necessarily on the final from here on?
This is stuff that will not be on the final. this is the this and yesterday, and I guess we started at Monday. The error handling, the try accept, and these are things that this is what, if we had an advanced Python class, would probably be the way we would start. But it's something you need to know about if you end up doing any programming. And for those of you that are networking majors and cyber defense majors that say, well, when I'm done this class, I'm done programming. Cisco, I've said this before, Cisco is pushing using Python as a way of creating your own dashboards, creating your own ways of updating your switches, routers, creating your own monitoring them. They've got some libraries that you can use, and you just extend those libraries, and some of those libraries are in the form of classes. I can take a Cisco router, for example, and it's not just Cisco. I can do it with Juniper routers and some other brands, and I can, over the network, using Python, I can go in and check my configuration, log in, I can check, do status, I can update the configuration files through a Python program. If you're cyber defense, either a lot of it is still done in Unix using bash scripting, but also more and more I'm seeing it's done in Python when you want to write software to monitor your network, to test your network, things like that. So those of you that are saying, I'm not a programming major, I'm never going to see programming again, I think you will. One of the other things you hear in networking anymore is software-defined networking. And basically, whether it's Python or some others, software-defined networking is using programming to manage essentially your network. So it's, again, this is nice stuff to be aware of. Okay. So what I've done here is I've, again, created those two variables that are part of the class, and I've created these three methods. I've got a method for me to rename the dog, for me to rename the bark, to change those variables, and also just a print that just prints the bark and the dog name on it. Now, to use those, the first thing you have to do is a fancy word called instantiate the class. Instantiating a class is creating a variable based on that class. Where I've said my dog is equal to dog, that created an instance of dog. That is no different than saying X equal 10, and you create an instance or a variable called X and give it a value of 10. When I do my dog equal dog, I am creating an instance, or I'm creating a variable, call it, although it's a class name, think of it as a variable called my dog, and it is based on this class dog, so that my dog has everything, every property that a dog has. So it's more complex. Maybe think of it as when we created lists or dictionaries where we gave those values, but it was more complex than a simple string or a simple variable, integer and all. So I create an instance of my dog. I could, and we'll do it in a minute, you can have multiple instances of it. You can actually even create an array. I'm sorry, C++ language. You can create a list of dogs. So you can even create them in the list and things. Now, to use it, I use the name of my variable, my class, my instance of that class, my dog. So I say my dog dot. Now we've already seen that syntax before. We have seen the syntax where we've done the say name dot strip, where we told it, okay, name's the variable, strip is the method. Name's the variable, strip is the method. So it's really the same thing here. Here's the variable, but it's a class. And the method we're doing is, in this case, we're printing out, or we're accessing the variable that is part of it. So my dog.bark is the variable name. And then my dog.name, the second line, we're updating it. So when I run it, this first print, Fido and Loud are the bark and the dog name. Then I've updated to soft for the bark and Ralph for the name, where I'm calling it. Here I'm calling the function. Here I'm accessing a variable, where the complete name of the variable is mydog.bark, the name of the class, instance of the class, and then the name of the variable in it. Here where it's a function, it's mydog.updateBark and its value, mydog.update, and then I'm printing the output. So when I run this, it says Loud and Fido, because when I just created the dog, the defaults were Fido and Loud. I did not have to have a default there. If I didn't have a default value when I created it, okay, the first line is blank now because there were no values there. So change it back to Fido and Loud. Now there is a way that, and other ways of setting defaults, but that's fine for here. So when I called the update name and passed it a name, it changed the name. And I can do that. I could have what's a name for a dog? George. I don't know anybody's called their dog George, but I can call that function, my dog dot update name, and put the variable here, and then we'll just print everything again. And then that updated it, George, where this could be a variable, maybe the user input. Maybe I've got a program that says, you know, what is your dog's name? What is your dog's bark? Is it loud, soft, whatever? And anything else that I have for it. So any questions there?
I have a question.
Okay.
Could you please scroll down to make sure I need to make sure I got all of this down?
I can scroll it up, but again, you know, this will be posted in that shared folder right after it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the way you got your class defined, all your print statements, you could substitute my dog period print dog.
Yes. Yes. I could. Where I did it this way, you're exactly right. That's what I was going to getting ready to do. Instead of these. This way, of course, it won't look quite the same, but if I did my dog dot print dog, and it'll look a little different. Missing a required, let's see what print dog. Dog.name, dog.bark. should work with the self. Maybe I don't need the self in there. Okay, I guess I don't need. I got to have the self in C++. So here I've created that one, and now the formatting's different because I didn't use an F string, but loud and Fido this first time it called it. So, and for printing, I'm not sure that I would generally have methods for printing much unless I had a complex format. But for updating, this is where you get into some real arguments with folks about classes and things. I can actually do my dog dot dname equals Bob, and that would change the my dog name to Bob, and you can see here it did, where I've actually directly accessed that variable name to change its value. This is frowned upon in object-oriented programming. And if this was C++ or Java and the idea of public and private variables, if those were what we would call private variables, there would be no way to change them that way. If you read their, believe it or not, programmers argue with each other. And it's not a bad thing. They argue about the better ways and the worst ways and things to do it. And there, in the Python community, there is a big argument over whether or not they should add private variables so that you cannot do this. You cannot change the value of a class variable without a function for it, a method for it. I can see both sides of it, and I'm not going to get into that argument, but you can do it that way. The other thing you can do, again, you can have multiple instances of a dog. So I can say your dog is equal to a dog. And now, if your dog dot print dog, okay, the your dog is also there. So I've got my dog and your dog. So I've got multiple instances of it. So I can have several dogs there. I can have several dogs.
Could you go my dog equals your dog? Will that work?
I believe it will. Let me change the dog's name here in my dog. And I'll do it the other way. Your dog equals mine, but if I could type. Can't seem to hit. My dog dot name equals Sally. And if I said your dog equals my dog, then your dog dot print my dog's name should be Sally now. Let's see.
You have Bob up top. Bob in the double quotes.
That really shouldn't make a difference, single or double. Okay, Bob. Print my dog, your dog.
You got dot name instead of dot D name on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. You're right. I'm not sure why I didn't get an error there. Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, variable name's correct.
Keeping us on our toes. Clever.
Yep. So now, yes. So yes, you can copy an entire instance of a class. So you can copy an entire instance of a class. So once I change that, and I thought you could, just wanted to make sure. You could even, I believe, I've not tried this in a long time. You can't do this in C++, but I think I could do new dog is equal to your dog. And yeah, I can generate, if I've got an existing instance, I can create a new instance of it that way by just saying it's equal to the other. So that would actually create a new instance based, again, in this case, based on your dog. All right, any questions there? And that's just an introduction to classes. Monday, barring any problems and all, I may do a little bit more with classes, and really starting Monday is going to be Q&A Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. As of right now, the final is going to be both programming and question and answer. I glanced at the numbers this morning, and right now the doing a question and answer plus programming is about 5 or 6 votes ahead between all 4 classes. So unless everybody that has not done it, and at least half the people in all the classes have taken the survey, unless that changes, it's going to be a combination. So there'll probably be about 20 questions, similar to the midterm. And then you will do 2 programs. I will again give you 2 groups. I'll say pick one from section A, one from section B, or whatever I call the sections. And so I'll probably give you 3 choices in each of those sections. My plan is that not everybody will get the same choices. What I plan to do, and I'm hoping to do, is have 6 to 10 programs in each section and have it randomly give you 3 as your choices. That way, that's going to reduce hopefully eliminate, but reduce any cheating on getting information from other people. Nobody in here am I worried about. I have caught a couple of students cheating on their lab assignments. They said initially that they had not even shared code with anybody, but they had a couple of programs that they had done very wrong in a very odd way, And when I compared their code, it was character for character the same. And so I gave them zeros on those assignments and all, but that way, that will hopefully reduce the, okay, you took it today. What were your questions? What my plan is to open them up the Sunday of finals week and give everybody Sunday through either Tuesday or Wednesday to finish them. That way you don't have to be here at 10:30 on Wednesday morning to do it. Because I know some people, because of it, that are still working, they've changed their work schedules and all. Does any of you have an issue with doing it that way?
I think that's awesome. Mr. Sabri did something similar with a test for us this morning.
Yeah.
We did the D2L part during class time, and then the hands-on, he gave us a couple days to get that worked out.
Yeah.
And that was, you know.
It will be timed, both parts. You'll probably get 30 minutes on the question and answer because there's only going to be about 20 questions. And you'll get 2 hours on the programming. So you'll actually have more time than you had on the in-class midterm. So you'll get that. The way I will do it is the programming part, instead of being in the Dropbox, the programming part will actually be in a quiz. You'll open the quiz, you'll read the question, you'll do your code in PyCharm or whatever you're coding in, and then you'll just take that code and you'll cut and paste it into the answer in the quiz. It sometimes messes up the spacing a little bit, so if it does that, I will fix that. Don't worry about that part. I will fix that, and if there's any indentation problems due to cut and paste. I ended up having to do that with the night class because they were supposed to do their midterm the day we came back from spring break, and it worked well with the night class doing it that way. So that's the way I'm planning on doing it. Okay, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, if nobody has questions, if you'll go ahead and log out, Derek, since you had wanted to meet with me about noon, just hang on, and once everybody's logged out, we'll talk, okay?
All right, I'll stick around.
Have a good one.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the insight. I'm still trying to get the list to print one on top of each other using another while loop.
Okay, you want to, before everybody else logs out, you want to share your screen real quick and let's look at it? I'll go ahead.